So without further ado, I might get Toby back on stage very quickly with where we are, John Burton from Lonsec and Stephen Tang from Zenith to battle it out on stage over here. We've got a range of moderated sessions and MC sessions to talk about, I guess, how managed accounts fit in and how we manage that whole structure and how they work with advisors. So, gentlemen, welcome to the stage.
Howdy.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, I'll get out of the way.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Look, we are going to start off with a managed account session, and it's my pleasure to introduce John Burton, who's head of distribution for Lonsec, and Stephen Tang, who's leads the investment consulting part of Zenith. And we're going to talk about the issues around implementation, establishment and implementation of managed accounts. So without further ado, let me hand over to Stephen to start off.
Okay. Thanks, Toby. That was a bit quicker than the Melbourne introduction, but okay, no worries. Okay, so for my bit, I am going to discuss the investment considerations that you have to sort of take when you're thinking about setting up a managed account, and then John will go through more of the advice side. So from my perspective...
Here's your remote.
Oh yeah, that'd be helping you. I did have a practice run in Melbourne, so I sort of knew what the slides were, so it's a bit quicker. There's a disclaimer. Can they see the presentation tapes?
Oh, on the screen. On the
okay. Okay, so starting at this, unless you want to go through the disclaimer, starting at this slide first, the investment philosophy really stands at the centre of any sort of discussion you have about a managed account. It really is the core of the decision-making process that you want to go through. Everything else that you see here sort of feeds in and feeds back from that actual decision that you make around the investment philosophy. So what I'm going to do is going to talk through each of these points, and then I'll sort of circle back. So the investment philosophy. As we all know, an investment philosophy is a set of principles that guides your investment making decision. It really is how are you going to manage these managed accounts, and it's important that you have a really clear and well-defined investment philosophy because markets can be volatile like they are today, and you need to be very clear on what you're trying to achieve in a managed account. So, I'll put up our philosophy here. It really is around sort of trying to deliver more consistent returns, and you really want to keep it fairly simple. You don't want to make it too complex. You want to make it pretty clear and simple so that you understand what you're trying to do. The why is the important part, and the why is, you see there in the chart is trying to show you that if you deliver more consistent returns, you sort of end up at a better end point. That's what you're trying to deliver, and that's why we sort of have that philosophy. But really, it's up to you, like what is your philosophy? What is it you believe in, and how are you going to manage these portfolios? So when we think about a philosophy, it's underpinned by a couple of beliefs, or fundamental beliefs. I'll put a couple down there in terms of they're pretty common. Markets are inefficient or efficient. If you think markets are efficient, then, well, an index solution is probably something that you'd be looking for in terms of that one. If you believe markets are inefficient, active management is a good way to go. Diversification. Diversification is an interesting one. Everyone's heard of diversification, knows about diversification, but often it's forgotten and people don't think about it. When markets are going really well, nobody wants diversification. When markets are going really poorly, everyone wants diversification. So really, you need to think about this one, because if you really don't care about the path of delivery, like I just mentioned in our philosophy, then it doesn't matter, just invest in shares. You don't need a multi-asset portfolio. The path is what you're really trying to control here in that diversification story. The next one is really probably more around what we do, but we believe research is key. It allows you to evolve your processes as things evolve, as the markets evolve, and we think that's an important consideration. In terms of once you do that, you've got an investment philosophy, then you need to make a decision about what are your objectives, and really that comes from what type of portfolios are you going to set up. What are they going to be their purpose? If capital growth is your intention, like you're trying to grow the capital over time, then probably a CPI cash plus objective makes sense. That's the long-term goal. It's what you're trying to achieve. If you want to be more benchmark aware and you're more market aware, then a benchmark aware approach is probably going to be more suited to you. So you want to be using some sort of benchmark to actually do that. Obviously, you can set up other types of portfolios, income, ESG, RRI portfolios, or responsible investing portfolios, and they can have different objectives. Once you've done that though, you really do need to make sure you're measuring success in an appropriate way. And why I say that is, like, if you want a CPI cash plus objective, or you decide that's the way you want to go, then you shouldn't be, should be looking at that every year, or every month, or every quarter. That really is, needs to be judged over an appropriate time horizon. So for a portfolio, you're talking about 5 to 7 years, and for a balanced portfolio generally. And so that's really what you should be guiding about. What often happens is clients decide that they want to actually, sort of alternate between the two, between a benchmark and a CPI. That creates some inherent tension in what you're trying to achieve. If you're really worried about a benchmark, then that's going to be very hard, like to be just keeping your eye on that long term. If that benchmark is your core consideration, then that's what you should be thinking about. And when you talk about a multi-asset portfolio, you really need to think about what is the benchmark that you want to use for that multi-asset portfolios. Now, I know there are a lot of industry standard multi-asset portfolios, and there's a common one that's used across a lot of platforms. I won't mention it because it's a competitor. But that benchmark is not appropriate for most multi-asset portfolios, because it really should be, when you set up a benchmark, matched to your SAA. And why I say that is, it's going to be pretty random otherwise what happens to your portfolio versus that benchmark. If you're trying to manage to that benchmark, but your SAA is completely different, it isn't really going to marry up very well. So it really is important you choose that benchmark wisely if that's the decision you want to take. Now, this is an interesting one and probably doesn't get a lot of discussion points. A lot of times it gets put into this fee budget sort of discussion that I'll get to in a little bit. And this is the tolerance for active risk. Tolerance for active risk is separate to volatility. So in volatility, you've probably discussed that in investment philosophy. What are you trying to achieve? Again, thinking about that absolute sort of more consistent returns, that's volatility. But active risk is actually tracking error or active return sort of variability. This can add a fair bit of variability to your path of returns. And why I say this, if you have a benchmark, you've chosen that benchmark, and let's say you pick an active risk budget of about 2%. Now, 2/3 of the time, you're going to be within that one, plus or minus 2%. But it is within parameters to be +4 and -4. That's actually within parameters and completely could happen. So, and that's running a pretty tight tracking area of -2%. So you need to be comfortable with that. Are you comfortable having a discussion with your client about underperformance of a benchmark that could be quite considerable? If not, then you need to think about your tolerance for active risk. If that's the case, then maybe a core satellite approach is a better approach for you, or you can dial up and down the active risk of actually the managers that you use. And that's really an important consideration, because even if you don't have a benchmark, let's say I don't want to go to the benchmark path, you're still going to get variability in returns from active management. It doesn't matter. It's not linear. Alpha is not linear no matter what you do, and as much as a quant as you want to put into it, sometimes the alpha just correlates and you get an outcome that's not what you would desire. That just can happen. So you just need to be aware of that and be comfortable having that conversation with your clients. Fees, I just touched on fees just before. Fees are often the starting point we have with our clients. Often we start with that conversation around fees. And most of the time we know it's about client best interest, and client best interest is more than fees, but it often is the starting point for our conversations. Fees are really, as I said, an outcome of all the other decisions you've made somewhat. So if you don't believe in active management, you believe markets are efficient, index suits you and the fees will correspond to that. If you want a fully active portfolio, well, that's going to cost you money. Now, in a managed account, we certainly can get those costs down, but it's going to be more expensive than a core satellite approach. There's no way around it. I can't sort of go and get an active manager to give me index fees. So, that's some of the choices you need to make. Once you've done that whole process, you've gone through all those considerations, then the decision has to be, can you find an off-the-shelf solution, or do you want to go build a customised version? Customisation, lots of levers, and we've discussed some of them. Fees, targeted risk, as I said, is an important one. Do you believe in increased diversification? What is it that you're trying to customise? Like, there's lots of levers you can pull, but really, do you want to do that? The common ones we find, and we have common ones when we come back to client portfolios that we have discussions around, is clients want to retain a point of differentiation. They don't want a Me Too sort of solution that they can sell to their clients. They want to be actually able to say these portfolios are our own, and you can't get them anywhere else. Otherwise, the more common one is actually long-standing portfolios. So, you don't want to make wholesale changes. So often if you go into an off-the-shelf, you're going to have to sell whatever, that you hold out previously to go into those managed accounts. Generally, you can hold them outside the assets, but the purpose of a managed account is efficiency, so you want to be sort of getting as much of the portfolio into these. So long-standing portfolios means that, if you've held long-held funds, your clients have got large capital gains in them and they don't want to be selling them. That's often the most common one we come across is like, I don't want to sell these funds, and it can be quite a substantial portion of the portfolio. Therefore, a customised version is actually the solution that you want to go down to. Finally, as I said, the fee budget is common. So, fee budgets can be ranged from anywhere, from 0.2 to 1 plus. So that's really like, as in, the fee budget is a discussion that we have with a lot of clients as well about hitting a specific fee budget. We have a number off the shelf, but they don't always hit that fee budget. Okay, with that is actually my part of the portfolio discussion, and I'm going to hand over to John.
Thanks very much. So John is the head of distribution. So we're now going to start to touch on the issues of actually implementing the portfolio once the sort of investment framework and investment decisions are made. John.
Thank you, Toby, and thank you, Stephen, and good morning. I'm sure everybody in this room knows and understands the benefits of managed accounts. Improved risk and compliance outcomes, the improved and speed and ease of portfolio implementation, certainly having an investment expert to help guide and make some decisions, and lastly having some deeper client relationships are all benefits that you can expect from a move to managed accounts. But that road is not always smooth, and it's sometimes difficult for a business to get to a full implementation across their practice. Often people will start with their new clients and implement it for those newer clients, but moving it back through and getting your existing clients on there can prove difficult, and that's what we mean by full implementation of managed accounts in a practice. But it is where you then receive the greatest amount of benefit. That road is certainly can be rocky. We often see advisors start and then stop on that implementation journey. We sometimes see them start and stall and get going again, and some can't start at all, either because they don't know where or how to begin that journey. To that end, Lonsec, we employed 2 practice management consultants last year, and their role was specifically to understand the challenges that businesses face in getting to full implementation and being able to help those practices with the guidance, the support, collateral, whatever's required to help them push through to full implementation or indeed to get started. They've been working with about 70 practices in the last 6 months, and so they're incredibly well placed to be able to see what those challenges are and what has been the critical success factors in moving a business to full implementation. And that's what I'll take you through today. So let's start with some of those challenges. And just with any business initiative or change that you're wanting to execute in your business, there's a few things that can impact that. Obviously, it could be just a lack of commitment to the initiative itself. You might not have got all your staff across it and been fully committed. It might be poor planning. It might be not making the right adjustments to your business along the way, or it could have been in the execution. And that's no different when it comes to managed accounts. We see exactly the same things. In the area of commitment, probably one of the things that we see quite often is just businesses being unclear of what business outcomes they want to achieve from managed accounts. It's one thing to know what the benefits are, and that might mean that you are going to be far more efficient. You might be able to create some capacity. But what are the outcomes that you actually want to achieve from that? Is it a profit figure? Is it reducing the strain on your back office? Is it being able to look after your existing clients better? And often when those outcomes, those business outcomes are unclear, then certainly it's difficult for that full commitment to take place in pushing through and getting it done. Likewise, we often see that the leadership in the business is not clear on the cost benefit, certainly in year one. In the first 12 months, if you're implementing managed accounts on review of your client, then it's going to take a minimum of 12 months potentially. And so you need to understand that there's going to be SOA costs. You might have a staff member that you need to have to make sure that the implementation goes smoothly at a client level. And so often when the business owners or leaders don't understand that it's going to take 12 months to really see the full benefits start to take effect, then certainly that commitment starts to wane, and it's often when we see businesses stall in this approach. And last but not least there, just staff being fully engaged and confident in a change in process, maybe a change in the way that they're going to service. They might not understand the benefits of the change themselves, and that can really curb the once again, full implementation. On the planning side of things, if we don't see that a move to managed accounts forms part of a business plan or strategy, it often means that it's not once again going down to the staff well. In a one-man band with a couple of staff, it's pretty easy, right? You can tell people over a Monday morning meeting that we're moving, this is our new way of working, we're going to have a managed account, and away you go. In a business with 5 or 10 or 20 advisors and 50 staff or whatever it might be, that can be a very different thing. And when we see it in the form of, in the business plan, when we see it in the objectives and key results for staff, then it tends to obviously get implemented so much better, because what gets measured at the end of the day will get done. Certainly, if a business doesn't have a project plan around it, we'll help them with a project plan and really start to map out what might be required in terms of training, in terms of collateral, in terms of anything else for that matter, just to make sure that it all runs smoothly. But I think the most important thing there in terms of poor planning is just being able to assess where your staff are in terms of capacity. Where are they right now in terms of time and workload, and how is that playing out for them? Often we see businesses almost right on the edge in terms of capacity at the moment. There's a lot of new clients coming through. They've obviously had a lot of work to do through COVID with the existing clients and the markets that we see today. And often those back office staff are right on the edge as well. We know a move to managed accounts will alleviate that, but we need to understand how you can get it done. And so we recently spoke to a business that had I guess, a goal of getting full implementation completed before the end of this calendar year. They've moved out about 18 months just because of the capacity, and when we really looked at the capacity of the staff, they did push it out. In terms of not making adjustments to the business, by far and away the biggest thing that we see is just really an unclear value proposition, or not making the refinements to the value proposition that you might need to make. If you've been the investment expert for your clients for many, many years, and you're now going to partner with an investment expert to make those calls, and you're going to spend your time then having a deeper goal conversation, or you're going to put it in to those existing clients, that is a change to your value proposition. You need to be very clear about how you're going to articulate that and how you're going to position that with your clients. Stephen's touched on the investment philosophy and how important it is. We find that is obviously critical as well, and I'll speak about that a bit later. And certainly just understanding the change management that might occur for your business and thinking through some of those changes. If your power planner today is doing 5 plans a week and you're then going to ask them to do another 5 SOAs to get the transition completed, then they might feel that they're going to be under pressure. If they do 2 or 3 ROAs a week and they do 15 ROAs a week and a couple of plans, and a move to managed accounts will alleviate the need for the ROA, then they might be feeling their job might be at risk. So you need to understand there is a change management program here that you need to go through, communicating well with your staff along the way about where you're taking the business and how you're going to get them trained, what their role will be, and so on. And the last is this last area here that prevents full implementation is poor execution. Sometimes that can be limited product knowledge or training that's taken place. For other times, it might be just not having the right client collateral. But once again, far and away, the thing that stands out for us is that clear communication, clear positioning when the client is sitting in front of you. What are you going to say about the move to managed accounts? How are you going to articulate maybe a change in narrative with your value proposition? How are you going to get it done? And once again, you know, with a one-man band, we can sit down with them, we'll give them some talking points, we'll give them a bit of training, and away they go, they're up and running. But for multi-advisor firms, we need to spend the time in having a practice workshop, getting everyone on the same page around what they're going to say in front of those clients and how they're going to interact with your clients. Absolutely critical. And we're seeing at the moment, you know, often in advice firms, the advisors in that firm all doing something quite different in some respects. And so moving toward a one-way, same-way approach in the way that you engage the client is absolutely vital. So obviously what is required is the opposite of all of that, a clear strategy and a clear plan, a high level of commitment by the leaders in the business, and making those required adjustments as you need to enable that implementation to take place. Certainly on the commitment side, when we see the leadership of a business being able to know exactly where they're heading in terms of the goals of that business, the strategy of the business, makes that level of commitment from the staff so much more. If they can say, this is our flag on the hill, in 5 years our business is going to look like X, you know, we want to be this size, you know, it just gives you know, that staff confidence that the business is going in the right direction, and that they should be a part of it. It's really, really important. So if I had to pick the top 6, the critical success factors, the things that we see that really make the difference in terms of implementation, this is them. It must form part of your business plan and the objectives and key results for staff. As I said, in a smaller business, it might be easy enough to do that on a Monday morning meeting. For larger businesses, you need to take it seriously and stick it in the business plan and make sure that it's clear to everyone that this is a move that's going to benefit the business long term. Review the value of your advice. You know, if it's not maybe the top one, it makes the grand final. I think that you know, it's certainly a vital area right now, you know, in any event in its own right, but certainly with a move to managed accounts and potentially a change in your proposition needs to be articulated clearly. It might mean that you need to redefine or review and refine your value proposition. It might mean just a change in narrative that does make the difference. Interestingly, we worked with a small business in Victoria over the last few months, and when I first met this business owner, I said, he said, I want to move to managed accounts. And I said, great, what's your value proposition? And he said, well, I look after the investments of my clients. Was pretty much it. Look, he didn't say that at first. He said, look, I deal with the long term, you know, they're on a journey and their long-term peace and well-being and their great life, all that. Like, he said all the right things. And then I said, well, how do you deliver that? And he said, yeah, I just do the investments. But he did have a great value proposition because he dealt with, you know, 50-odd high net worth farming families where, you know, he dug down into the issues that they face, whether it's succession, you know, whether it was, yes, their investments, but all the needs of a bigger farming, you know, high net worth family. And so just being able to refine his value proposition around that advice piece to a high net worth family really made the difference for him. He was then able to go ahead, articulate the change well to managed accounts, and he was off and running. Certainly considering the change management aspects I've mentioned, but it is particularly important. Certainly choosing an investment manager that supports and also complements your investment beliefs we think is important as well. Certainly it makes the acceleration to full implementation easier. At Lonsec, we believe in a dynamic approach to asset allocation. We believe in diversification. We believe in protecting downside risk. And when an advisor comes back to us and says, well, that's how we see things as well, then it certainly makes that implementation so much smoother. And the last one there, number 6, the understanding the financial implications and the business outcomes. We will work with businesses on a cost-benefit analysis if they want to go down that path. We can help them set some goals around the impact that they want to make to profit or client satisfaction or staff engagement. Whatever is going to be important with this move to managed accounts, we can help them set those goals and make sure that all of the business is on the same page. So it really is, and Toby mentioned it at the start, it really is a practice transformation that a move to managed accounts can give you. And when your advice and your value proposition, when your client engagement is in alignment with your proposition, when your service proposition is in alignment with those two things, and your investments as well all line up and are on the same page, then it certainly enables business to take that next leap in terms of scale and growth. And so when you consider it not just a product or a change to an investment recommendation, but an enabler of your practice being able to transform into something better, then it really does make a difference, and it is the key to success. In terms of the Lonsec transformation process, there's 10 steps up there, but they're not really steps. They're in any order really. However, we will look at those big ticket items first: the strategy and the planning, the project planning. We'll obviously help you articulate and refine a value proposition. We'll help on the investment philosophy side in terms of building that, as Stephen mentioned before. And then we'll get down into the weeds. And getting down into the weeds is, which client, what's the batting order of clients that you're looking to transition. We'll get involved in SOA text, or how you're going to have the client conversation. What are those talking points that you want consistent across your entire business? We'll get involved in that and make sure that all of those advice areas are covered off and you're good to go, and your business is good to go as well. The last thing I'll touch on is that we will then, hold businesses' hands through that process. We do need to troubleshoot and problem solve as we go, and so we'll set obviously some key milestones that we'd like to hit, some key goals as a business that you'd like to hit, and make sure that we're assisting you in down that path to full implementation, ultimately getting all the benefits that managed accounts can offer. So look, thank you. That's it from me. I'm going to hand you back to Toby, maybe for a few questions, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, John. Now, so first of all, before I ask John and Stephen questions, are there any questions from the floor about the process for either Zenith or Lonsec, or the issues which an advice business might face? No. Well, look, let's start off with the news of overnight of a 75 basis point rise in the Fed rate. Not specifically what does that mean for portfolios, but at a time like this, Stephen, when we're going to be expecting a greater degree of volatility, how do you think portfolios can be developed to sort of accommodate the sort of more volatile, lower return type environment that we might be heading into?
Interesting question. So the first part is having proper diversification. I don't want to bang on the table here because we talk about this a lot, but alternatives have really been, if you look at alternatives historically, I think people had a large reluctance to use those type of strategies. But if you look at what's happened more recently and what's actually stood up in the most recent markets, there hasn't been many assets. Alternatives are one of those assets, and it does depend on which strategy you're talking about, but I think alternatives have been a very good place to sort of be and have in your portfolio. So I think, being properly diversified across lots of different assets, different strategies, trying as, there's no magic bullet though. Like I've got to be clear here, like as in you can try your best and do everything you can, use all the risk tools that you can. At the end of the day, things happen and the markets are always slightly different. As they say, they sort of rhyme, they don't repeat. So, you sort of get similar outcomes, but if you look at COVID was short and sharp and we sort of had a really elevated volatility. There's not much you could have done in that scenario, but the assets that performed well in that scenario were very different to the assets that are performing today. We've had, a very sort of different market environment that will come from. Rising interest rates is an interesting one because we had discussion around, everyone's talking around the bond markets at the moment and what's going on in bond markets. The interesting part of that discussion is that actually as rates rise, your actually expected returns from bonds get better. Your starting point for bonds is better. So, if you look back, probably a year ago, people are saying, wow, I'm getting 85 basis points on my 10-year US bond. I'm like, well, what's the point? Good point, and that was valid. But today everyone's like, well, bonds are now at 4 or 5%, and I don't like them. I'm like, well, aren't they better value now than they were at 85 basis points? Sure, it depends on the outlook for inflation, but clearly there are some positives of what's happening in the markets. Clearly, I don't like volatility either, but there are some positives. Your starting point for equities, for instance, is better now. They've gone down, so your starting point is better. So your expected returns actually might be better from here than they were prior to the downturn. Like as in, just because the starting point is lower. So it's not all doom and gloom. It is a very volatile period, and it's really hard to sort of protect the portfolios in this environment. But I think you just got to look at through the noise and say, well, actually there are more opportunities for active management. The last 10 years, it's pretty much been just pile into index and away you go. Your returns were fantastic. But now I think returns for active managers should be much better. I'm not saying they're going to be that today, but I think dispersion around assets is much greater now than they were in the 10 years prior. So I think you're going to get a lot better returns out of that sort of area than you have in the past.
So this is a question for both of you then, which is that given that we're in a more uncertain, well, we've been through a period of volatility, which means that of necessity we're in a period of more uncertainty. I mean, how should the sort of professional portfolio construction teams in a Lonsec or a Zenith work with advisors to kind of help them manage the messaging to clients?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, look, I think that first and foremost, I mean, at Lonsec, we've built all of our portfolios to protect that downside risk. And so, I think we'll obviously do reasonably well through this period as well as you can. But I think that as long as you can demonstrate to your client that they're still on track to achieve their goals, then I think that's the most vital thing. Even if their money's down, that you can sit in that review and show them that they're still going to tick off everything that they wanted to achieve in their life, then their portfolio is on track. And as long as you're doing everything you can to make sure that their investments are in the right order, that downside risk is protected, then they're going to be okay.
Yeah. Look, John, you spoke about the value proposition and the importance of a clarity of value proposition. I mean, let's dig a little deeper into that issue of, okay, what makes, what have you seen as successful value propositions for advisors who've then said, right, okay, well, I'm no longer the stock picker. Now I'm part of a managed account process. So how does that value proposition get articulated?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's obviously going to be unique to those businesses, but at the end of the day, you want to see the consistency from the kind of advice that they give. That value proposition should be a running stream right through their business, right? It's how they're going to service clients. It's how they're going to, articulate what they do. I mean, if a value proposition is, all about the long term, goal identification of, goal achievement for the client, and yet everything on review is all about the investments, well, it's just not in alignment. And so, that's probably the most important thing. It's going to be unique for your business, but if it's a consistent look and feel, if that client experience is connected all the way through from their advice proposition through to their client engagement, into their servicing and into their investments, then it certainly looks and feels very good. And I've probably poked my nose into about 80 practices in the last 6 months myself, and I've probably come out of 5 where I went, oh my God, these guys are really good at what they do, and there's probably one where I went, I want to be a client. They were so clear on what they do for their clients and how they interact with them and how they deliver advice. It was good to see.
Yeah. Okay. So let's sort of extend that issue then of the value proposition into one of sort of branding and sort of identification. And you both touched on sort of customization and differentiation. So let's talk about whether it's better for an advice practice to say, right, well, these are the dockside financial planning portfolios, or we're dockside financial planning, but we work with Zenith. Zenith are our investment partners, or Lonsec are our investment partners. I mean, how do you see successful organisations managing that sort of branding and positioning issue?
Well, look, once again, it's going to be, what is going to work for that business. So, I've seen some of our practices absolutely talk about Lonsec being, their investments being powered by Lonsec, and they can talk to the fact that, they've used us for research for 20 years, that we've built portfolios for them in the past, and this is just a natural extension and innovation. For others, we provide all the client communication so that they could sit right in the middle of that, and they can say, look, we've made these investment changes, and as if it's their own, but the execution's done from somebody else. So I think it's just whatever's going to work for it, and once again, it's just that clarity that every advisor in your business is on the same page, and often when we start to, we've got a 6-advisor firm at the moment. The principal's very clear, and he's moving his money to managed accounts. The other 5 advisors in his business are just unclear. They all do something a little differently, and that inconsistency is just something that we continue to battle, especially in that space.
Stephen, what do you see in Zenith in the way that that advice businesses either use or sort of stand behind your brand?
So, in all these things, we are a partner, but I have to be open here. Like for most of the managed accounts we sort of operate with our clients, we are the designated model manager. So in effect, we get sort of put into all the PDSs. We get put in, so it's pretty hard to hide the fact that we're there behind the scenes. So like as in our name gets mentioned and everything that's there. They are mostly branded the practice names though. So like as in, I can't think of many that just have a balanced portfolio or a growth portfolio. They'll be named something very unique to that practice. But I think it's very clear that most of the firms we work with do want to sort of stand back from the investment decision making and say to like, look, we've partnered with somebody who has the tools, the people, and really that's their day-to-day job. They want to hand away that investment sort of management sort of off to somebody else and say, well, we're partnering with somebody we really do think is going to do that job much better than we could do it on. And that's not to say they don't have an input into our process. We always have meetings and committee meetings with the clients, and they always have that input. But but most of them would say, like, we're trying to step away from that. We don't want to be the investment manager. We want somebody else to do that. So for most of them, that's the way we operate.
Are there questions? Yes, Carlisle. Yeah.
Especially at a time now, the volatility is quite there. Is there a process that you have automatically that you communicate with the advisors that you're looking after to say, we have made certain changes, or this is going to be the strategy that's going to have some changes that will affect the portfolio, or do you wait for the advisor to ring in to say, what are you doing?
So the question for those who didn't hear it is how do each of them manage communication at a time like this?
Yeah, so we try to be proactive, but like our approach is to always make you aware, or our clients aware of any changes we make to the portfolio. If we're going to make a change, we'll tell you. Most of the communication that comes out of us is around really more of the behaviour, about like making sure that clients stay sort of invested. It's easy to sort of think, timing. DAA, we have that capability, but it's not a capability that means that you're going to switch around the portfolio every second day. So you want to be clear with that proposition and say to clients, yes, you can adjust the portfolios, but you're not going to make wholesale. It really is around that communication, around staying invested, staying calm, staying sort of, remembering that timing markets is very difficult. We've sent out all these pieces and we'll continue to do that. We do have a program of engagement with all clients, so like as in but we have a very different model, so let me be clear here. Most of our client base is in a customised managed account. We have, our clients can ring us up anytime they want. Like, we have assigned consultants to those accounts, and basically your go-to is your team that basically handles your account. Doesn't mean we don't have broad communication, but if you want anything from us, we actually say, you ring us and we'll take care of whatever you need. So it's a very proactive, but also, you ring us, and we'll have meetings with you if you want. Like that's how we do all our sort of communication. We're very hands-on. I'm sure Lonsec's the same. You basically, we're there for your benefit. If you need something, just ring us. You have our numbers, you have our emails. It's not a general line, it's actually a direct line to one of us. So, we're there to help all of our partners through these times, and we know it's hard.
So John, at a time like this, when a major financial event is the lead item on the news, I mean, how do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, look, it's not too different, to be fair. We'll always communicate that we're going to be making a change to any portfolio if we are, and then that will give you all the collateral and education and everything that you need to be able to have quality conversations with your clients. So yeah, it's no different, and of course, likewise, you can get on the phone and ring any of our team and we'll help.
Look, the red light is flashing at us. Stephen, John, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks, Toby.